This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, with agriculture broadcaster Orion Samuelson and yours truly, Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. Coming up on this weekend's broadcast, farmers and others try to put it back together after the terrible storms. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this weekend's broadcast. Alongside me here, Mike Pearson blew in from somewhere.
It's good to be in the studio, Max. I tell you what.
Winds have been brutal out there. It was somewhat reminiscent of derecho, but...
It was. A lot of folks in Iowa were concerned when they saw that storm moving across the state.
No standing crop in the field. That's a big difference.
Yes,
certainly,
it is.
By all means. But we want to go to Kentucky and visit a little bit with a farm broadcaster friend of ours, Alan Watts, with whom we check in from time to time, because we know you have a good grasp of what's happening in normal times, and now with the tragedy right there in your backyard, we wanted to talk about the ag effect. I drove through there just hours before the storm, and it was just remarkable. The air had this feel to it. A farmer friend of mine commented,
yes, it did.
It doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm. You know, you can sometimes feel weather coming, and we saw this tornado, and our crew here at the radio station, we do a great job tracking weather, doing weather broadcasts, and we saw it coming out of Arkansas. We thought, you know, surely it won't make it to Kentucky. It travels across Arkansas, the Boothville of Missouri, into western Tennessee, then up into Kentucky, and then over 200 miles on the ground in Kentucky, this tornado did. And boy, it has really taken this a toll on our state.
What have you heard from the farmers? I understand there were some grain facilities took a hard hit.
Yes, Mayfield Grain, Commissioner of Agriculture Brian Quarles, had a chance to visit with him a couple of days ago on the radio. 5 million bushels of grain there impacted by this. It just ripped the tops off of some of the grain bins there. And of course, a grain operation like Mayfield Grain has huge bins, just ripped the top right off of them, and they're not sure how they're going to unload 5 million bushels of grain out of those elevators. But there was also a hatchery in Graves County for Pilgrim's Pride, for the Pilgrim's Pride processing plant there, and it's destroyed that, just completely wiped it off the map. They're going to rebuild, which is good news. In Princeton, you heard the Grain and Forage Center of Excellence, UK Research and Education Center there. A couple of years ago, they built the Grain and Forage Center of Excellence, a $13 million project. It's all laying on the ground, Max and Mike. And moved the tobacco barn. There's a dark tobacco barn that Dr. Andy Bailey uses to do a lot of his research on dark tobacco there at the Princeton station. Picked it up off the foundation and moved it over into the field next to the foundation. Just didn't hurt the barn, but just picked it up, moved it off the foundation. And just the devastation, I think, on agriculture, we may not know for a while what the dollar amount is, but this obviously could be the most expensive cleanup operation for agriculture ever in the history of Kentucky.
Wow, it is staggering to see some of those images. Alan, I've been seeing some friends on Facebook, farmer friends, coming together, putting together relief packages to send down to growers in Kentucky. Have you started to see help arriving from other places?
Yes, we're already getting help. I talked to the Commissioner of Agriculture. They've gotten help, and our county extension offices here in Kentucky are really the key point. And it's fencing supplies. It's anything that we may need, fence posts, anything like that farmers may need to get their crops. Thank goodness our crop year was pretty much over with. The only thing in the ground right now, for the most part, is wheat. But farmers who had things such as their cattle running loose out there still today, and just getting some of those supplies in here are vital for our farmers. And farmers are the last to ask for help. And you know how farmers are. You know, they don't want to ask for help. But there are cases across Kentucky here that folks will definitely need some help. It'll take a lot of time to rebuild Kentucky agriculture as a result of this. You
know, that's a really good point. I've seen a lot of folks coming together helping reunite lost pets with their owners. I imagine there's going to be quite the chore reuniting all these lost cattle with their owners as well, Alan.
Yes, I'm sure it will be, because, you know, if your fences were all blown away, and many places they were just wiped off the map, the fences were, your cattle could be miles away from where they were. And I think just the first focus, of course, has been just to make sure everybody's okay, all the people are okay. But farmers are out there now looking to make sure that their farms are okay, reestablishing fences, feed mills. There was 20 some odd feed mills around western Kentucky that were hit hard. And of course, obviously they rely on those feed mills to feed their cattle. And they're where they can rebuild, but it's going to take some time to get those rebuilt as well.
That's a really good point. None of these things happen quickly. It takes time to get everybody's feet back under them. Well, Alan, we wish you the best of luck as Kentucky rebuilds after this catastrophe. Our very own Patrick Haggerty had a chance to touch base with Debbie Stabenow, Democratic Senator from Michigan, as she was preparing to discuss how all of the funds from the infrastructure bill are going to be allocated to different states and organizations.
There will be grants going to states. And the largest part of what will be done is in the form of grants to states who will then decide where the need is and how they cover all parts of their state. In addition to that, the USDA has already sent out requests for proposals for the money that they were given that will go specifically to small towns and rural communities. And so I'm encouraging people to put together proposals and to get those into the USDA because they know how to do it through the Reconnect program. And we want to get that out the door as quickly as possible.
And that was Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow. Get those proposals into the USDA and bring some of that grant money home to your communities. Now it's time to talk markets. And joining me this week is Jim McCormick of agmarket.net. And Jim, the Fed looks like they are going to be tightening their monetary policy going forward. Does that mean we could see some downside risk in the commodities?
I think we could a little bit, but the reality is you saw what the number said. I don't think he shocked anybody. He pretty much said, hey, it looks like their goal is maybe 3 rate increases in 2022, as well as speeding up the tapering process. But you think about where we're at 0 to quarter point interest rate. So if you raise it 3 times, you're looking at 1% interest rate. The reality is if we can't handle 1% interest rate, I'm really fearful for where we are economically. So I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. It's something we got to pay attention on. Loans are going to get a little bit more expensive, but I don't think it's going to put the economy into a tailspin.
Well, that's good news. Well, let's talk about the corn market, Jim. We do see ethanol demand continue to stay strong. As you look at corn here through the end of 2021, is the bias to the upside?
I think the bias is to the upside. I mean, we are hitting some technical chart resistance right here the last couple of weeks, right around this, 590 level, but I think eventually we will break out of it. Like you said, the demand for the ethanol is very strong. We do have the big January crop report, which I think has a shot at being friendly. The old crop could be revised lower just due to how tight the market was, the basis strength in the fall. And then even the new crop, the Eastern Corn Belt, if you just drive around, there's just not a lot of corn piled out there, which kind of gives me a hint that maybe this crop's a little bit smaller.
Well, Jim, and that makes me wonder, across the country, are we seeing stronger than average basis for a lot of growers in the countryside?
We are in the Eastern Corn Belt seeing a little bit better basis strength than the Western Corn Belt, but it is probably definitely better than you normally would see. That's another maybe hint that maybe this crop is going to be revised a little bit lower in January.
On the export side, Jim, where do you think? Are we going to hit some of our export targets for this upcoming year?
That's probably the biggest worry right now is the export target pace. I mean, Brazil, we're doing okay right now, but Brazil's got a pretty big crop on the way. That window from when they start exporting really gets wide open here in January, so that's something we need to watch. Corn, it's a situation where overall the corn demand's been relatively well. China was a big buyer early in the year. We haven't seen them for months now. Mexico's kind of picked up that slack a little bit, as well as Canada, which is kind of nice to see. But I think overall, you still got to be optimistic that the demand will be there.
Oh, that's good to hear. On the livestock feed demand, as you look ahead to this next year, cattle numbers are coming down. The hog number is going to be able to sustain some demand for feed grains?
I think they should sustain it. Part of the reason what's going to be kind of interesting is the lysine shortage right now. We are getting a lysine shortage around the world. Problems, logistics, getting it in. If you can't get that lysine in, what we're seeing is you got to increase your meal part of the consumption by 20%, depending on where you are in that growth cycle. Hence, should increase the demand for meal. And then when you bring in the meal, you got to talk about Argentina, which is fighting a little bit of dryness right now. It's early to say the crop's in big trouble. We need to watch because Argentina is the big meal exporter in the world. If they can't export meal in the world, guess where the buyers come? The United States.
So with that meal being a concern for growers who might be worried about that lysine, hog producers, as we get through this next year, should they be locking in some longer-term meal purchases?
I think you probably should. Producers look for pullbacks. The meal has caught a huge bid here the last couple of days. Some of that is unwinding of the oil meal spread. Some of it is index rebalance, moving out of wheat into meal.
Okay. On the wheat side, that market has kind of taken a tumble this week. What's going on?
Like I said, part of that is just technically we took out the long-term uptrend line, took out some long-term moving averages, so we're seeing some technical selling. Fundamentally, there is some revisions. The Argentina crop has looked maybe a couple million metric tons bigger than they thought, possibly the Australian crop, so that kind of hit the market. And like I said, we did see some index funds who were in the wheat choosing to move out of the wheat and reinvest in potentially meal.
All right, lots to talk about when it comes to money flow in these markets. It seems that just grows in importance each year, Jim. We'll discuss that when we return. Folks, we'll have more with Jim McCormick from agmarket.net when we come back. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by AgriGold, your seed ally in the field, with unparalleled options that perform on your farm. Learn more at agrigold.com. We're talking markets with Jim McCormick of agmarket.net. And Jim, we touched on the soybean market there just briefly, but let's go into a little more detail. Brazilian crop coming along. What have you heard out of the fields in South America?
Well, it's really kind of a double dynamic. I mean, you got to remember, this is a huge country. So, one region is actually getting ready to harvest, that's Mato Grosso, and they're actually a little bit too wet, which could actually slow harvest. On the other hand, you go down to Paraná, they're a little bit too dry. Their crop's going into the flowering stage in the beans and get ready to pollinate in the corn. And then you go into Argentina, they're still just getting ready to plant. So you're hearing a lot of volatility depending on what headline the computers want to read. But in general, you got to remember, there's a big crop out there. It's around a 144 crop. So if they lose a couple million, it's not going to have a huge impact on the world numbers. The real question is, does it fall below 140? And it's just way too early to know that.
Okay, and I know it's still very early, but as you mentioned, Mato Grosso, they're getting ready to get those combines rolling. They're getting ready to start that safrinha corn crop planting. Do you have a handle on acres expected for this year's safrinha crop? Did they struggle getting inputs in South America?
At this point, I think they did struggle just like the rest of the world. I mean, we haven't heard a huge reduction, but it's something we need to watch. I mean, maybe they'll plant it, they just may not put as much fertilizer on. But the one thing we need to keep an eye on, you said it's a second crop. The problem would be if they stay too wet in the northern part of Brazil and they struggle to get that crop out, then they're going to be late getting the corn in, which could make that corn situation a little bit interesting, kind of like we saw last year.
All right. Well, let's talk domestically. We had the crush report come out from NOPA earlier this week. Very strong domestic demand for bean oil and bean meal seems to be hanging in there.
Yes, it does. And I mean, it's nice to see that crush right there. The bean oil backed off a little bit here recently. I think the market got a little bit frothy on this bean oil biofuel talk here that really was kind of the rage earlier this year. But it's something you really got to be optimistic if you're a producer of beans, because I think in the long run, I think we're definitely going that way. The big difference with the bean oil, this biodiesel renewable is the energy market's not fighting us. The reality is the energy market for the ethanol, we're always kind of fighting. Are we going to blend ethanol, the RINs, and everything else? On the other hand, on this renewable fuels, it's the energy sector is actually partnering with ag to do it. So you're looking at a very, very good dynamic, I think, to push demand forward for this product when we get there in a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing positive is that's domestic. I'd much rather be selling beans to a bean oil processor who's going to put on airplanes to fly planes around the world than try to figure out, are the Chinese, or are they not going to buy our beans?
That's a great point. So in the short term, of course, we've got that oil pulling back a little bit. Do you expect this to be a sizable correction in oil?
I don't think it's going to be a sizable correction, but I think the meal's starting to move back up. It's going to kind of pull it up. The demand's there. Veg oils are relatively tight. Food inflation is still something the world is very, very worried about. So, until we get inflation under control, you're going to find end users buying that dip on the idea that, hey, inflation could come roaring back at any moment.
Now, looking ahead to this next year, and I know it's still very early, but growers are making those decisions, getting those inputs bought ahead for the 2022 season. Does agmarket.net have a guess on acreage mix for next year?
Right now, we don't have an official guess. I think our early thought process, though, we're probably going to pick up a few more bean acres. I think we definitely picked up more wheat acres. I know we picked up wheat acres here in northern Illinois. I had customers here that planted more wheat than ever. And I think we are going to lose some corn acres simply because of the high price of fertilizer, as well as disease pressure. Agronomically, if you've been doing corn on corn on corn to jump the beans when you got 12, 15 new crop beans, it makes sense to me to do that. So I think a few more beans, a little less corn, maybe a little more wheat. But what the reality is, we've never been in a situation. Cotton farmers, do they plant cotton, rice, canola, oats? Right now, what's interesting is everything's profitable. So this demand or argument, for acreage is not going to be settled in December. It's not going to be settled in January. It may not be settled till May.
Oof, lots to keep an eye on. If I know what I'm planting, do I make some sales for next fall already, Jim?
I think I would, especially when you look at the profitability. Run your numbers. If you're profitable, go ahead and hedge some of this risk off. Anything we know the last couple of years, volatility is high.
Lots to think about in the markets. That was Jim McCormick from agmarket.net.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform, combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability. As is often the case, Chad Colby was out kicking tires this week. You know, this is the season for those small indoor regional farm shows, and Chad found one.
He did, and it's always a great place to get up close and personal with some of this equipment.
I think he learned some things that we might want to pass along to growers. Here's his report.
As you know, harvest season has ended, and now it's time for farm show season. If you haven't heard this past week, there were a couple announcements. The first one being there's not going to be Agritechnica this year. If you recall, it was rescheduled until March of 2022. Now it moves back to 23. But there was a farm show this week, and I was in Westfield, Indiana, which is just north of Indianapolis, for the Indiana Farm Equipment and Technology Expo. And one thing I noticed talking to producers is the challenge for this upcoming season. And the challenge is really about getting supplies needed for their farms and ranches. I talked with a friend of mine, Eric Frank from Performance Ag Indiana, and he shared some of those concerns.
This is a huge challenge this year, is getting product to the grower this year. We've ordered parts about 7 months ago for planting season this year, and we're not sure, and our suppliers can't tell us when it's going to get here. So I encourage all the growers out there to get that planter in the barn before the new year. Make sure you're getting your parts ordered, whether it's for field cultivators or planters. Just get the orders in to your dealers to get your parts spoken for. You know, it's one of those things too on planters that, you know, you might be wanting to start to talk to your dealers about the 2023 planter. I mean, there are sales coming in and people speaking for planters already. And if you really look into next year, if you have any attachments looking to go on that combine or corn head, you may want to be looking at that too. I mean, it's as crazy as it is, we need to get on top of this and not be waiting till, you know, midsummer, because it just won't be there. You'll be waiting until 2023 for that next attachment you want.
Eric's 100% right. The one thing I would add, part of the reason is getting that planter out of the shed early is so you can get to the dealer earlier and get some of that available inventory they might have now. For This Week at Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Fair warning there from Chad Colby. If you're going to be updating your equipment over the course of the winter, as many of you plan to do, make sure you can get the parts.
That's right. Move soon if you're updating or upgrading. Get those orders in early.
This equipment's been upgraded over the years. Some old machines at the Perryville, Missouri American Tractor Museum. We happened to be in the area this week. We visited with some folks who really put the display together. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. In many farm circles this winter, there's a lot of talk about transportation.
There certainly is, Max. Lots of concerns about transportation. Had a chance while at the Iowa Farm Bureau annual meeting to talk to Sam Kiefer. He's their public policy vice president, and he shared there are lots of concerns with this administration.
Well, this administration took over after 4 years of the Trump administration, and frankly, we had a great relationship with the previous administration. And we didn't know what to expect with the Biden administration, but we've been pleasantly surprised. We have differences in policy, but we have access. They answer the phone, they open the door, we're able to engage in conversations. We've been working with them on several issues. Supply chain is probably the biggest one and the longest lasting conversation. We've been advocating with them to make what we believe to be common sense changes to ease the concerns on the supply chain, primarily on the labor side, making sure that folks are able to hire the workers that they need, utilize them in a fashion, and that we can transport our goods from the farm and also get the inputs that we need to the farm.
And on the conversations you've been having with the administration on the supply chain issues, have they taken any action?
We are seeing a few things where they're trying to lessen, but at the end of the day, one of the things that concerns us the most right now is the looming vaccine mandate. We support vaccines. We are encouraging our members and folks across rural America to utilize the vaccine. We inoculate our animals. We do that because it's the right thing to do, the healthy thing to do. But when it comes to humans and when it comes to employees, our concern, particularly when it comes to the supply chain, is we haven't seen a crunch in the supply chain like we would if USDA tells all their port inspectors, all their meat inspectors to stay home and not work. That is one of the things that we're cautioning the administration right now. We have seen that they're delaying what they call their implementation or their penalty phase.
The other issue floating in a lot of growers' minds this year is waters of the U.S. WOTUS. We've heard a lot from Michael Regan since he was nominated to that Secretary of the EPA Administrator position. Do we have a roadmap yet for what a WOTUS rewrite might look like?
Well, we got that roadmap 2 days before Thanksgiving. We are still knee-deep in analysis, but from the beginning of this administration, we knew that waters of the U.S. was on the table. We knew that they wanted to roll back some of what we believe to be good things that the previous administration put in place. The roadmap that they released a little over 2 weeks ago is not as bad as some may have expected, but it's a far cry from the navigable waters protection rule that we supported. Primarily, our biggest concern, among many, but our biggest concern is that the significant Nexus rule would now be codified into the regulation. And what that means is previously, under the Trump rule, a producer or a farmer could look at a GIS map and make a determination as to whether or not that land feature would qualify as federally regulated ground. Under the significant Nexus test, it's a determination made by a federal employee at the Army Corps of Engineers or the Environmental Protection Agency. They come to your farm, they look at the land feature, and then they make a determination if that land has more than an insignificant relationship. That's a legal term. More than an insignificant relationship with a navigable water. That's concerning. And that requires that farmers would have to have engineers, likely, environmental consultants, possibly even attorneys on their side working with them, working for them to make a determination or to prove that their land is not federally regulated. That's not a clear rule. We want a clear rule, and we'll be working with the administration, with the Army Corps of Engineers, with the EPA to make sure that we can find our way to a new but clear rule that farmers have some certainty.
That was Sam Kiefer from the American Farm Bureau Federation with concerns about what might come out of this administration. Well, there are some concerns down on the farm as well as we get close to a new year. Perhaps it's time to think about the transition on your operation. Had a conversation with Jolene Brown about that very topic.
January's coming, and that annual meeting and the time you gather is really important. And when it comes to family, what I know is that if you love and honor them, you'd better do the business right. So at this neat meeting today, I get to spend time with them, giving them take-home tools so they can do just that.
So what sort of tools do you like to see farm families have in their hands?
Well, there's 4 foundation ones that they will hear. The first is silence is the great destroyer of family and business. I have a 90-year-old now in the nursing home who owns all of the farmland that their family farms. And they asked me to go and see her because they don't know what's in her will. And so I asked permission, and she wanted to meet me, and she said, well, Jolene, I'm not going to tell you what's in my will because right now all of my children come to visit. So what I mean, silence is the great destroyer. It's going to destroy the family. The second thing they're going to learn, and this is so important, is that a conversation is not a contract. And if it is not in writing, it doesn't exist. So they're going to hear today that farmers lie. They do. You want to hear what the lies are? The first is, work hard, someday this will all be yours. And the second is, I'm going to retire. And the third is, oh, you don't have to worry about your brothers and sisters. They have their jobs. They're not interested in the business. Now that's true until you're dead. Everybody's very interested in the assets. So what they will hear today is with family, more not less must be in writing. And they have to have good advisors, an attorney, an accountant, and financial planner to put those pieces together. And they want them to trump a will because wills are changed on a whim.
Well, if your Christmas time might have those conversations about transition, Jolene has also written several books. You can find these at jolenebrown.com.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. One of the most important things we do on this show, I think, is talk to growers and bring their innovations to a wider audience. And Max, I know you've been having those conversations with our Plant Smart, Grow Smart series. What's on this week?
Yeah, Terry Wellman is a fellow we visited with a few weeks ago. Terry is at Hanscom, Minnesota. He looks at the data very closely. As he shared in our visit, he wants to continually make improvement. He's looking for where the improvement in yield is coming from. you're getting a wealth of data coming in from your operation now. Are you where you want to be with the data coming in and the interpretation of it?
What I've done on my farm is taken all 10 plus years of precision data that we've got, yields, whatever, I roll those together into a maximum yield. So I've got a map on my farm for every acre that I know what the highest yield I've ever produced there. So if I'm producing 250 bushels in one area, 325 in another, maybe 350 or plus in pockets, I am now using those in my yield goals. I'm fertilizing for that because in my mind, if I've done it once, I can probably do it again.
And you are where you want to be in fungicide.
I am.
Usage and application.
Yep. So that's become standard practice. I don't even think twice about check strips anymore. That is planned in the budget from the beginning. We know what products we like. I'm really excited about what Revitech for soybeans and what Veltima has done for corn. Those are staples in our lineup, absolutely.
Let me circle back to that yield question I asked you. What have you seen in the way of yield, Terry?
Up here, we're seeing a solid 10 bushels year over year, regardless of the disease pressure. So I think some of that's obviously protecting your plants, but the plant health benefits from the product line has been a big deal. We've really seen our yield increase, bringing in products, the fungicides, the Veltima, Revitech, using pre-action. We'll use different products for the price point and what our yield potential is. And that's a really exciting thing, is to be able to monitor the season and know what product fits the right acre.
Look into the future here a little bit. Where do you see your farm advancing? Where do you really, really want to improve? That hierarchy of things you want to improve, what's at the top, Terry?
Well, so we've spent a lot of money on infrastructure. We put up a new grain setup this year, a new dryer, some bins. So I alleviated a lot of my bottlenecks at harvest time with having to haul grain off. So now I can focus on getting the crop out, get it timely, get the fall prep work done, fertilizer down, ground tilled, all of that stuff. So we've solved those problems. The other big thing is fertility. Just trying to understand where yield is coming from, and that goes back to the data analytics and realizing where I'm getting my yield improvement from.
Are you excited about what lies ahead, Terry? What can be done in these fields of yours and the opportunity to raise the productivity?
I am. The genetics are a big thing. The chemistry is a big thing. We're learning more and more every year. The best way to stop a problem is to get in front of it. So products like Veltima really lets you get out there before that happens. If you've been farming for any number of years and you're in your field often, you start understanding what the environmental conditions are for a given year. Are you more prone to having disease? Do you need to get out there earlier? That's what's really exciting about the new product lineup, is being able to know that you can get in front of a problem before it happens and still get the season-long coverage and benefit. There's gain to be had out there. You just got to go get it.
We do get some quotable quotes from the growers that we visited with, such as Terry Wellman, his comment there, the best way to stop a problem is to get in front of it. Yeah, you could say that about many different situations too. See more of our Plan Smart, Grow Smart series at plansmartgrowsmart.com. Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. Well, certainly everyone has been talking about the weather. We need to discuss it with our meteorologist. My goodness, Greg, the records that have been set falling by the wayside. Will we see more records broken here the days ahead?
I think so. But then again, Arctic air is on the move. And anytime we get these cold Arctic air masses and you have the lingering warmth, and it will likely be record setting farther south, mind you, over the southern states, you're going to strengthen the wind field. And we are not done with this chaotic and wild and action-packed weather pattern as it applies to the plains, points to the east. And for now, enjoy it while you may, even as far south as California. One weather system here in the Pacific Northwest and a little dip in the jet here across areas of the Dakotas and southern Canadian prairie. The wind has been blowing. 1 week it's snow, the next week it's severe weather. And this week, for a change, we haven't seen this in a while, the pooling of bitter cold air, Arctic air, It's still kind of a zonal west to east wind flow here, so there's no sign of at least moving in areas along and west of the divide. East could be a different story, so be ready, livestock managers. And there's still a string of weather systems offshore, so the moisture pattern continues on. We've seen big drought improvement along the Cascades and westward. Should begin to see some modest improvement with new snow coming on down across Big Sky and into the western Dakotas. And again, these wild temperature swings continue on, but a trend towards bitter cold this week into the northern plains and southern Canadian prairie. One weather system offshore. We've seen moisture of late through California, not a trademark, mind you, of La Nina, so enjoy it while you may. Of course, it has been just a hellacious spell of weather last week with high winds, severe weather, record-setting warmth, mind you. Weather quieting down across the central and southern plains here. A couple of showers and thunderstorms early to mid parts of the week. We do transition to colder weather across the central high plains area. Still mild across the south end of the winter wheat belt. A cool off for the desert southwest. A bit of a break before new moisture gets going max into the valleys of California on northward later in the week.
You know, it's interesting to see what effect that new moisture might have. You know, many of those farmers who irrigate in California have been told they won't have irrigation water this year.
That's right. So again, it's a La Nina year. Typically, it's the Pacific Northwest, Northern California. You'll see that in the extended outlook here. And as we take a look at the weather through the rest of the winter and springtime season, it will be there, not southward, that we do see some improvement to the drought weather pattern. Here is a more quieter and a lackadaisical set of weather maps and charts into the early parts of the week across the Corn Belt locales, coming off mud and severe weather and hail and high wind and snow and the whole 9 yards. Things kind of quiet down, more of a zonal west to east flow. The cold air is here. Seasonal conditions across the plains and points across the Corn Belt and opportunities to assess, clean up, and recover. Well, I'm sure these livestock areas and confinement areas have taken a hit with the wind and severe weather of late. Couple of weather systems, Rio Grande into areas of the southwestern states. A couple of showers and thunderstorms over the southern plains. Dry, high pressure cleanup and recovery for now. Continuing on across Kentucky and the Tennessee Valley. We'll see these weather systems take a southerly whip with some moisture later in the week across the Gulf Coast and down through Old Mexico.
Well, many folks in the east continue to be a little bit warmer than normal.
That's right, and no sign of Arctic air moving on in. The cold air up towards the Sioux. Little rain snow system here. Feature across the western Corn Belt is fast moving, and same with the weather systems here. A couple of cold fronts on the move. No big hairy lows, no record warmth. Temperatures continue on closer to seasonal norms across the Corn Belt this week. It's action-packed with showers and thunderstorms in the warmth across the Gulf Coast early to middle parts of the week, and still wet weather. We'll take it from Texas in through Florida, drying out across the Carolinas. Watch the drought there later in the week.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. Now we get Greg's indeed extended outlook, as the announcer said there, I think on into the middle part of January. And there'll be some more moisture coming along for the folks in the west, it appears.
Yeah, that's right. And primarily in Northern California, Pacific Northwest for this week. Things quieting down. And boy, we need a break across the plains. The warmth was great, mind you, but not the severe aspect across the plains and the areas into the Ohio Valley. And there will be moisture this week. Go ahead and enjoy it while you may. Valleys of California, Pacific Northwest, water equivalency a couple of inches. Wet weather down through Texas, the Gulf Coast area. Little, if anything, organized across much of the heartland. This will be a little weak lake disturbance coming in here with some lake effect moisture, some snow there into the northeast of New England, dry up and down the eastern seaboard, down through Florida ways as well.
Well, as we say good riddance to the year 2021, many can't wait to do so. How does it look as we bring in 2022 then?
Well, you know, we've been talking around the holiday season that this would begin to take place here. And we're going to see it this week near the Canadian border, maybe Big Sky country. And by the time we get into the first couple of days of the new year, building back across California, this is sub-zero nighttime and daytime readings here. Look at the warmth, and there's still the propensity for record warmth across this part of the country. And it is one heck of a jet stream in probably 150, 180 mile an hour clip. And it certainly serves up this particular setup. Enjoy it. More moisture for the central and northern valleys of California. Will begin to continue to put down snow, and that will be snow, by the way, for the northern plains, northern and eastern Corn Belt. Normal precip in this part of the country, drying out Oklahoma down through Texas.
I worry about that temperature differential. Could there be tornadic activity in January?
You know, I've been doing this for 30 years. I don't know when really the severe weather season starts and when does it end, across the country. So we'll keep an eye on that. The cold air is going to get firmly entrenched, though, up towards the Canadian border, northern Corn Belt areas, down to the Ohio, the warmth, if you will, retrograding Oklahoma, Texas, back into the valleys of California. That main trough and that range of temperatures is right here across the heartland. So busy weather pattern. It's been delayed in getting going the winter season. Here it is up across areas of the northern plains, much of the heartland into the eastern states. This is good news here with dryness and drought drying out through West Texas and again back into the central and southern valleys of California.
By the week of January 10th, will we see further encroachment of the cold air?
Yeah, it's a locked into position right here across the plains all the way down into the central end of the winter wheat belt. Here is the warmth for the valleys of California, Texas, Gulf Coast area. Temperatures will vary across the heartland, meaning a wide range. Helps to fuel here an active weather pattern. Pacific Northwest now, more snow back in the forecast across the Corn Belt, eastern states. Welcome moisture down across the Carolinas, all the way down through Georgia too.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
Now don't forget when you're restoring your tractor. A little bit of advice from Max's Tractor Shed. Take those pictures in places where maybe folks wouldn't be looking, but you took the time to restore it right up over the top of the hood, for example. On this orchard tractor we'll show you. Max's Tractor Shed, brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. Make your New Year's resolution to make that shop look even better, make it more functional. Get a Store Lock Tool Cabinet. You can see what they have by visiting their website, storelock.com. Well, there's a lot of metal on an orchard tractor, as there is on this Case 730 at the American Tractor Museum, Perryville, Missouri. I saw it the other day. And coming up, you'll hear the visit with Arlie, the fellow who restored all of those tractors and made them run in that museum. But an orchard tractor just naturally turns heads. There's a lot to see there, of course, with those sweeping fenders. But as you'll note in this photograph, get up over the hood a little bit. If you're taking pictures of your tractor, you worked real hard to make that finish look so good. Why not take a picture of it there, of your restored tractor, just like this 1961 J.I. Case 730 Orchard. Well, let's see what's selling over the next couple of weeks at Big Iron Auctions as we check in with our friend Mark Stock.
Big Iron has got a tremendous offering of equipment selling the next couple weeks. KRC Farms LLC is retiring. They're from Hiawatha, Kansas. They'll sell on December the 21st 110 high-quality items, including a 2015 John Deere DB60 36-row 20-inch planter. On December 22nd, folks, 2,700 plus items will sell, including a 2016 Hagie STS-16 self-propelled sprayer. Lamke Brothers are retiring. They're from Riverton, Illinois. They'll sell their 2019 Case IH 7250 combine. It only has 548 hours on the separator. Fosta Farms is retiring on December 22nd as well. They're from Milford, Nebraska. They've got a John Deere 8330 mechanical front tractor. Lauren Paulson is from Coleridge, Nebraska. They'll sell on December the 22nd a 2019 John Deere floater applicator. It only has 552 hours. Carlette Construction will sell from Buffalo, Wyoming 48 high-quality items, including a 2007 John Deere 270D LC excavator with a hydraulic thumb. Then Tom and Glenda Gassman will have their retirement auction on December the 23rd. 282 items, including a Case IH MX210 tractor. Then our year-end two-day auction that begins December the 29th and concludes December the 30th will feature just over 6,500 items. Go to BigIron.com where everything sells unreserved and there's no buyer's fees.
The FFA Chapter Tribute is sponsored by Nationwide, the #1 farm insurer in the country. To register your FFA chapter, go to nationwidesupportsffa.com. That's nationwidesupportsffa.com. Nationwide. We stand for you.
This Week in Agribusiness is proud to be getting to know the FFAers from across the country. And this week, we're meeting Jake Zakowski. He is the Ohio State FFA president. Jake, what are you most looking forward to in this upcoming school year?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to serve as a state officer for the past year and a half, serving as a state vice president last year. And what I really enjoy and look forward to is traveling the state, whether I'm in Cleveland, visiting a chapter along the Great Lakes, or down in Athens County near Ohio University, visiting our Appalachian food system. It's exciting to see the diversity of our members and our industry.
It certainly is. And Jake, what was it that got you active in FFA?
So I proudly grew up in a neighborhood, but joined FFA in the 8th grade. And what sparked my curiosity is just the interest of our food system, and really some great mentors that exposed me to agri-science, biotechnology, and plant science.
Very cool. And I know that interest in plant science has stuck with you. What are you looking forward to do after you finish your year of service as the Ohio president?
Yeah, so after my year of service, I'll be beginning a plant science degree at Cornell University and working in the controlled environment agriculture industry and trying to provide sustainable food and some supportive climate agriculture to Ohio and the Midwest.
That is interesting. That is certainly a hot topic, one that I think we will see the demand accelerate. Jake, what is the next big thing happening for the Ohio FFA?
In Ohio FFA, we're excited for National FFA Week, doing some visits for all across the state and getting members excited to celebrate their accomplishments in our organization and celebrating the history of 94 years in the United States.
94 years, that is fantastic. Well, Jake, we wish you the best of luck as you look out to the future and plan ahead for that Ohio FFA team.
Some people call them orphans and oddballs, those very uncommon tractors. We'll take you there to see some at the Tractor Museum next.
Thanks for joining us here on This Week in Agribusiness. Max, a little earlier in the show, you mentioned you had a chance to explore some antique tractors. Can you tell us a little bit more about where you were?
We were in southeast Missouri getting ready for our special Christmas show that'll be coming up. Christmas morning, Christmas weekend here on This Week in Agribusiness, but I met Arlie Burkbigler the other day. He's the guy behind the scenes making the magic, restoring those tractors in the American Tractor Museum. Arlie shared some of his insight with me.
It's interesting what I do. I enjoy what I do here, and I restore most of these tractors. We buy a few that's completed, but most of them, you tear them down to bare minimum, all the way down, and repair, and then you put everything back together after it's painted, you know, to make them look like they are, and they're all running back to life again, you know. It's an interesting job. I worked construction for many years, and then when I retired, Kenny asked me to get involved with him on some of this stuff, and it was very interesting, and I enjoyed it the whole time. It's not like if you got a job somewhere and you hate to go to it, you just waited for the next week to come, you know.
So even though these tractors are sitting here, a static display, each one of them could operate?
Everyone in this building operates. Mm-hmm. We don't have any gas in them now because of the building and the insurance and everything, but if you take any one of these outside and fuel it up and get it ready and prime it, it will run.
Arlie Burkbigler has some big supporters in his restoration effort on those tractors, Kenny and Rhonda Buckheit. They have really brought this museum together. It was a dream of Kenny's all those years ago to have these orphans and oddballs, unusual tractors under one roof. They talked with me about Arlie's work.
He's really an amazing person because he's able to fix most anything. You know, if it needs a part or something like that, if you can't find it, he figures out a way of making it, you know. And everything he looks at, we used to have something like this, or my dad had this, or my dad did that, and his uncle, and yeah, he's very knowledgeable.
His knowledge, indeed, of the history of these tractors and of the companies, and yours too. You know, that's one thing, if folks come in here and you happen to be here at the time, they might be a little bit surprised at how much you share about the backgrounds of these companies. It's more than just collecting them for you, isn't it, Kenny?
Yeah, I try to find the background, where they come out of, and who started the company, and where they eventually took them over, you know, or if they just cease to exist.
One thing, Rhonda, that I tell people when they come to Perryville, there's so much to see here. I mean, there is the Tractor Museum, but you proudly talk about other things here, don't you?
Well, yeah, the Vietnam Memorial, that is really special. I had a brother that fought over there, but he came home. And then we have the churches here, the seminary church, we call it, because at one time it was a seminary. And we used to have seminarians from all over come in here. And then they would be educated, and they went to China. I know several of them that went to China and spent their whole life over there, and then until they got kicked out. And it's just, you sit there and you think of all the good they did. It just makes you feel good to be around them.
They are some special people. We're proud to call them friends, Kenny Buckheit, Rhonda Buckheit, and their family there in the Perryville, Missouri area. We sure look forward to bringing that Christmas edition of This Week in Agribusiness to you from that area and from eastern Nebraska.
That's right. Lots to talk about there. And of course, we will continue to be thinking of those folks who were in the path of those storms, both across Kentucky and Illinois and Missouri. They've got a lot of work left ahead of them.
Well, you know, you think of other communities that have survived disasters of this nature. Parkersburg, Pella, Iowa, Monticello, Indiana, Princeton, Indiana. You know, those folks over the years have recovered. It hasn't been easy. Through their family, their faith, their friends, they've been able to carry on. But it's been a challenge, to be sure.
It certainly is. And this is the season when we think about our family and friends.
That's right. We look forward to being with you next weekend, right here on This Week in Agribusiness. Join us for that special Christmas edition of our broadcast. Along with Mr. Pearson, Max Armstrong wishing you a very Merry Christmas. Have a great week. Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.